So my name is Chad Griffiths. I've lived and worked in Edmonton my entire life, 20 years in industrial real estate, and I started investing in properties myself in 2014. So I'm going to just give an introduction on industrial real estate. But before we get into that, I think we should make up for not being able to do the bed bug dance. So can I be a little creative? Can I be a little crazy right now? So first, thanks to Alfonso and the Wealth Genius team for inviting me back. I was fortunate to speak in Toronto a couple of years ago, and I really want to give a big shout out to Alfonso. And one thing, I've been coaching kids sports for the last 10 years or so, and one thing that I love doing is getting everybody into a huddle, hands in, we do a countdown, and then we yell out the team name. I'm not going to get everybody into a huddle, obviously, but can I get everybody to stand up, pretend that we're doing the bed bug dance, which we're not going to be able to do. We're going to do a countdown, hands in, we're going to do a countdown, we're going to yell Alfonso on one. So 3, 2, 1, we're going to yell Alfonso. But what I say to the kids is that this needs to be loud. If it's quiet, the kids don't get pumped up, they don't want to play soccer, they don't want to play baseball. So we're going to get really pumped up. I want everybody in the lobby to hear this. This needs to be loud enough that people in the lobby are like, what the hell is going on? First we heard the bed bug dance, now we're hearing this chant. This needs to be loud. So 3, 2, 1, Alfonso. 3, 2, 1, Alfonso! That was awesome. Thank you so much for doing that with me. I knew this was the right group to do it when I could see the bed bug dance going on. Okay, so I had the date wrong. I'm going to fire my AI assistant. It's May 17th. It's not AI. I didn't use AI for this. Again, a little bit of background about myself. 20 years in industrial real estate, and what I want to actually talk about is, first of all, what is industrial real estate and why I think it'd be a good opportunity for those considering it. And first, anybody ever invest in industrial real estate before? One hand out of two possibly. Industrial real estate, the first thing I'll say is it's not for everybody. For the reason that everybody in this group is already in single family homes or multifamily, industrial real estate can actually be very complicated. And I like to say that having a healthy fear is actually really important for industrial real estate because it helps you avoid being that dumb money. Nobody wants to be the dumb money, and if you invest in something that you don't know, then there's the risk that you are that dumb money. So the first thing that I'd say is have a healthy fear or even a skepticism about why industrial real estate is right. And to go into that a bit, I want to actually do a comparison between industrial and multifamily. I'm guessing everybody is multifamily or single family, is that correct? For the most part. So I'm neither pro or against either one. I started investing in multifamily. I've since moved entirely into industrial. So I might have an inherent bias for liking industrial more, but I don't think one is necessarily better than the other. In fact, if you don't want to learn more about industrial real estate, I would say just to avoid it, because you don't want to be that dumb money. You want to be that educated money that you're making the best decision you can with the information you have available. I think if you rush into industrial, it could actually be very devastating. Why I like industrial and why I've moved from multifamily into industrial, generally you have long-term leases. So I have one building that I own. We have a 10-year tenant in there right now. We just put them in there about a year ago, so they have 9 years left. It's a Fortune 500 company, and we have them one single tenant. It's around a $3 million property, so call it the equivalent of a 15-unit multi-family building, depending on where you live. But we have one tenant in there, one tenant for 10 years. I never have to worry about going there in the evenings. I never have to worry about going there on the weekends. Anything breaks minor, they have an internal real estate department that deals with that. So I've owned that building for 4.5 years now. I've probably been to that building 4 times in that last time. We have a property management that handles it, one tenant, 10-year lease, very little issues with that. Compare that to a 15-unit apartment building. You have 15 tenants that are probably all on year leases, give or take, and all that turnover that goes with it. So there's just a lot more management that comes with looking after 15 residential tenants versus one corporate tenant on industrial. Now the flip side, I have to tell this part about the story as well, is when we originally bought that, we had a tenant in there that was coming off a 5-year lease, and that lease actually expired in November of 2024. So we had a 6-month window where they told us that they weren't going to renew anymore. They weren't going to renew at the end of their term. We had a 6-month window, but the prospect of having that building go from being 100% occupied to 100% vacant was very concerning. And I can tell you, in the summer of 2024, as we were approaching that deadline, I was pretty worried about the prospect of having mortgage, property taxes, utilities, insurance, all the operating level expenses on that property, and 0 tenants. Because just as it's easy to manage one tenant, when that one tenant leaves, you're now faced with 100% vacancy. And compare that to a multifamily building, whereas if one tenant leaves, you still have 14 others. That was a sleepless time. Our burn rate on that building was about $25,000 a month. That's what we were looking at as that lease was coming up in November. Fortunately, and this speaks to another benefit of it, is that we were able to find another tenant. We did a 10-year lease with them, and we actually got an escalation in those rates. So it works out, if you go on just a very simple capitalization method, we added a considerable amount of value to that building. But there were sleepless nights, I'll tell you, in the summer when I was looking at that one building being entirely vacant. So does anybody know the difference between triple net leases or net leases and gross rents? Gross lease versus a net lease? One over there, couple. So this is what one back there, this is what I really like about commercial the best. So if you could appreciate this 10-year lease that we just did, if that tenant committed to that whole 10 years for the same rate for that whole 10 years, as we have property taxes go up, as we have building insurance go up, as we have management fees, just general inflation, if we had a gross lease, which most people are probably doing in here, I'm correct? Most people would do just a gross 1-year lease. Maybe they pay their utilities over and above that. That's probably pretty common. In commercial, it's actually structured that you have a net amount that the tenant will pay, and then they also pay all the operating level expenses of the building. So anything required to operate that building, and generally that's taxes, insurance, maintenance, management fees, that's all on an estimated basis, and it reconciles every year. That's what's usually called the triple net lease. It's not exclusive to industrial. If you're actually looking at retail or office, it's very common to see that triple net structure. And the beauty of that is that we charge a net rent for the entire term of the lease. So the tenant will pay that contract rate for the whole term of the lease, but they also pay operating level expenses that get reconciled every year. Or in other words, 10% increase in taxes, that flows through to the tenant. So my net rent, my NOI, that's calculated for the whole term of the lease, regardless of whether property taxes go up or not. And that's big from the standpoint that most cities, and I'm in Edmonton, which is terrible, most cities are awful at managing property taxes. We all spend way more than we make, and that gets pushed through to the tenants, that gets pushed through to the taxes. If we don't have a measure of recapturing that, then you're starting to erode your NOI. So I think that's one of the biggest reasons that I really like industrial. You can get a long-term lease, you can have it on a triple net basis where any expense increases flow through to the tenants. You're dealing with corporations. I remember very well when I was dealing with single family and multifamily, it's really difficult to actually evict a tenant. Perhaps you develop a thicker skin and you're easier to do it, but I'd have a real hard time evicting a residential tenant in December as an example for not paying rent. In commercial, it's just business. I don't have any problem evicting a tenant if they're not paying their rent in December because it's a corporation. We also get to see under the hood on what a lot of these corporations have. So it's not uncommon during the due diligence process to actually go and look at what their financial statements are. What's their income? What's their income trend line? Do they have retained earnings? What's their balance sheet look like? You can actually scrutinize these companies quite a bit, and if you need to, you can charge more of a deposit, you can ask for a personal guarantee, and we're not beholden to the Residential Tenancy Act. Is that what it's called in other provinces, by the way, the Residential Tenancy Act, the government that basically prohibits you from doing anything? Commercial and industrial follows contract law. Outside of a very short period when we had the pandemic where there were some oversights, commercial and industrial is just contract law. So if a company's not paying their rent, you don't have to go through that whole bureaucratic red tape and long process with uncertainty of trying to evict a tenant. It's just contract law. So that's one of the things, and the last point that I have there is less hands-on. It's much easier to scale a large portfolio of industrial because the management and the hands-on is so much less than what's required from scaling multifamily. And anybody that has 100, 200 doors will attest to this. That becomes a very large portfolio that's hard to manage. So why industrial? Everybody's probably shopping online more and more these days. Is anybody shopping online less than they were last year, 2 years ago? Yeah, probably not. I myself, I try not to go to the store at all anymore if I don't have to. So e-commerce is going to continue growing. That trend's been started since the early 2000s, and it's only accelerating. There's only more and more coming, and you'll see that everywhere you go. People that aren't from Edmonton, when you're driving in, if you haven't been to the city in a while, you've probably seen numerous distribution space after distribution space right by the airport. There's a 1 million square foot Amazon facility that just went up 5 years ago. We've never had a 1 million square foot building in our market, and that's just one of them. There's another 3 million square foot Amazon facility in Atchison, which is the same thing that never existed before. So e-commerce is going to continue to grow. That's not going to slow down. We could add in reshoring. You start talking tariffs, and that starts becoming a wild conversation in itself. But there definitely is more of a push to have more manufacturing made in the same areas that it's consumed. So I do think that we're going to see more reshoring as well. And Edmonton is a huge manufacturing hub. So we love making things. We're really good at it. We've got a really diverse labor force. I can see manufacturing continuing to grow as well. I already mentioned the low management intensity. Here's another one. Tenants often invest considerably in their space. In residential, I know that it's actually very uncommon to have a tenant invest any money in the space. They might paint a wall, but I can't imagine, has anybody here had a tenant that actually went and made a renovation on their space? Like actually put $5,000 or $5,000, $10,000, you have?
Yeah, it was me though, when I was a tenant.
You're unique in that regard. I know most tenants don't want to spend any money. In commercial and industrial, it's not uncommon for a tenant to go and spend a few $100,000. If it's a large building, they might spend millions of dollars in the infrastructure in that space. That can be the racking systems, that can be specialized equipment, conveyor belts, upgrading the power, putting cranes in. It's not uncommon for these tenants to spend that much money in there, which makes them that much more sticky. If that tenant has sunk in $100,000 or $1 million into the space, when their lease comes up for renewal, if that space works for them, they're very likely to continue staying. Whereas if it's residential, sometimes tenants will just look to move if they can save $50 a month. That's enough for them to consider doing it. Much more sticky in industrial. I mentioned cash flow already, so I think that one's pretty clear. Here's just the one part, and I contemplated titling this one, Don't Invest in Industrial Real Estate, because I've already given the reasons why I think it's lucrative, but I think that there's still things that you need to know before you consider it. Again, there's reasons to be really optimistic. If you're listening to me and you're saying, I can rent to a corporation, I can get triple net leases, I don't have to deal with tenants outside, I can scale a portfolio, it all sounds really good. There's also a lot of reasons to be very apprehensive about it. So the biggest one is industrial is less familiar. I think I counted 3 hands in here, people that had experience in industrial. How many people would have experience? Actually, let me rephrase that. How many people would be interested in investing in industrial just based on what I said at a really high level? Anybody interested in doing it? That's where I was when I first started as well. 20 years ago, I knew absolutely nothing about industrial real estate other than I start hearing these little things, I start getting people's ideas for it, and I became pretty excited as well. I started in 2005. It took me until 2014 before I bought my first property. So active broker for 9 years or so before I bought my first property. So I'd really caution anybody that it is an unbelievable asset class. There's a reason that I have the majority of my net worth in this particular asset class, but it took me a long time to get there. And the main thing is that it's just not familiar. So if you don't understand something really well, I think that there's a really big risk that you're putting your capital in jeopardy. So just be very careful about that. Market dynamics, this can shift as well. And this would be one that I'd really want to emphasize. In apartments or multifamily, if you have a well-located building in a good area, you're always going to have a reasonable degree of comfort that you're going to find a tenant. Is that fair to say? If the market rate's $1,500, even if the market takes a really big turn, maybe you have to go to $1,200. Maybe you have to be a little creative and give some more free rent. In industrial, if you buy the wrong property, it can conceivably sit vacant for months, if not years. And I know an investor who bought a property in Redwater, which is 20 minutes northwest of here, 20 minutes northwest of Edmonton, and he bought the property. It had a construction company, a large construction company in there for 20 some years. He bought it 4 years in. He bought it when there was 2 years left. 4 years left on the lease. 2 years into that, the tenant said that they were actually going to vacate. So they were in there for 20 years. He thought that they would stay forever. 2 years in, they said that they were going to vacate out of the space. He tried subleasing it. The tenant tried subleasing it. He tried selling it. Being in red water, there wasn't much demand for it. Sat vacant that entire time. They continued to pay their rent because they had a lease on it. Then it sat vacant for another 2 years, and it just went into foreclosure a year ago. So that's an example that the supply and demand isn't as predictable as multifamily will be, where you're always going to have a reasonable degree of comfort that people are going to need a space to live. And then just understand the building's functionality. There's a big difference between a warehouse and a manufacturing property. There's a big difference between flex properties and land, industrial land. So just really understand that. And then the leases are also a lot more complicated. A formal lease on an industrial property can be 50, 60 pages and be very dense with legal terminology. So you just also need to understand that versus a residential lease. I put on some free resources here if you're interested in this. You can download any of these for free just to give you an idea on, and you don't have to sign, no email, you can just download these right off the website. I got a rent roll in there for an industrial basis, which takes into account net lease and gross lease, an NER calculator, which is helpful for any type of commercial property, an industrial property checklist, which I use all the time, and then a DSCR and cap rate chart. Just about out of time, so I'm going to finish up. I put out a book as well. It seems like a lot of people have put out books here. I just put this out last month if you want to pick it up. And my son, who's my little assistant, Drew, can you stand up? We got a copy of it. It was either he came with me to this or he watched his brother's baseball game, so he came here. I only have the one copy right now, but I'm going to give it away. Here's what I think I'm going to do. Any Winnipeg Jets fans in here tonight? Love it. Okay, so I want to see the Winnipeg Jets win tonight. I would love to see Toronto, Winnipeg, and Edmonton in the semifinals. So first Jets fan to give Drew a high five will take home that copy of the book. I am 5 seconds away. Thanks to any real quick questions? If you want to chat with me, I'll hang out for a few minutes. I'm right at time right now, so I will end it. I'll hang out over there. And again, first person to give Drew a high five that's a Jets fan will take home that book. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Griffiths.